This is nodus sinoatrialis. This is also called sinoatrial node or SA node. This one. As you see, it's a primary pacemaker. The primary, what does it mean, pace? Pace is actually the rhythm. So the nodus sinoatrialis is like your DJ, He is like setting the rhythm, so you know how to dance. So if it's just sets a classical music, you're like ta-dam, ta-dam, it's like 60 beats per minute. But if it sets like something like techno music, you're like tits, 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 and after that you understand, okay, let's beat 70, 80 times per minute. So this is the primary pacemaker. This primary pacemaker sets the whole rhythm for the whole conduction system, for the whole heart. And actually, what I need to say that these parts, all of these parts these are all the pacemaker cells. These are cardiomyocytes, but these are also cardiomyocytes, but actually a little bit more modified cardiomyocytes. So they can generate an action potential. They can generate the signal for the heart. Let's move forward. How does the signal come from the nodus sinoatrialis to the actual myocytes, for example here or here in atria, and how it comes to this part? We have our internodal tracts. Actually, we don't learn it at our universities in Munich, and I actually don't know. Do you really learn these internodal tracts?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so you're better than we are in this case. So these internodal tracts actually have myofibrils, because these, for example, these pacemakers, they don't have myofibrils, but they are like modified cardiomyocytes. So they actually supposed to have myofibrils, but they don't. So these anterior internodal tract, middle internodal tract, and posterior internodal tract, and this part of the interior internodal tract, which is called Bachmann's bundle, they have myofibrils, and these myofibrils help these internodal tracts to get the signal to the myocytes, to these actual myocytes, and to this part, because the pacemaker cells and the pacemaker cells and contractile myocytes, and two contractile myocytes, they can communicate through which, let's say, through which junctions? Does anybody know?
Nexus. It's a nexus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, through nexus. Why through nexus? What do you know about nexus? What is nexus?
Well, it's pretty fast to transmit the electric current, I think. Well, action potential. Yeah. So
yeah.
It's
so it's electric current. Yeah.
It's the fastest way.
Yeah. So it's the fastest way, and
is it like a gap junction?
Yeah, it's the same. So the gap junctions and nexus are the same. So if you have questions, like immediately ask me about it, okay? Because sometimes I can just forget about something. So these ways, I need to say, these ways are preferential ways, because we can. If I said that the pacemaker cells and the contractile myocyte, they communicate, and the myocytes communicate, and after that the myocytes and the pacemaker cells communicate, so we can get the signal from here to the myocytes, and these myocytes can get the signal after that to this part, yes? But it will be not, the velocity of that will be not so high. So these ways are preferential ways. They are the most important, the fastest ways. And if these ways supply with signal the right atrium, then the Bachmann's bundle supplies with the signal the left atrium. After that, it comes through these internodal tracts to nodus atrioventricularis, which is here, which is actually supposed to be between the atria and ventricles. This is why it's called atrioventricularis, but it's actually not, because we have, like, after that prolonged nodus atrioventricularis, but this is actually in another part of the conduction system. So it's a secondary pacemaker. Why do we need a secondary pacemaker if we actually have a pacemaker?
In case if it doesn't work?
Yeah, in case it doesn't work, because this is like plan B for nature. Nature thinks, okay, it doesn't work, but our heart is the most important thing for us. So let's do it like it needs to be. Let's make our heart to beat. So this is our secondary pacemaker, it works only if the node of sinoatrialis doesn't work, and it makes a delay. So why do we need a delay? So it says like something like, okay, please slow down the velocity. The velocity was too high for me. Let's slow down all of that because this is too fast. Why do we need this delay? Right here.
Because firstly we need contraction of atria
Yeah.
and then ventricles. So we need a delay because they shouldn't contract simultaneously.
Why do we need it? I mean, why do we need this coordinated contraction, not the contraction of all atrias, all ventricles at the same time?
Because cardiac output will be so low. In this case, cardiac output will be so low because we need firstly to blood to come to ventricles.
And it's actually not logical at all.
Why?
So this what if it would be contracted at the same time, because we first need the whole blood from here get to here to this ventricle, and after that to contract. So you are right. So we need this coordinated contraction first in atrias and after that in the ventricles, not at the same time. But the velocity of the signal is really high. So if we will make a signal here, it will immediately come here. So the whole heart will contract at the same time. So this is why this part of the conduction system says, hey, please slow down. We need only our atrias now to contract, not the ventricles. So this is a prevention. This is a real natural prevention of contraction of the atrias and the ventricles at the same time. Is it clear? Did you get it or?
Yes.
Okay. But as you see, we have another structures. For example, His bundle. The His bundle connect the atrias and the ventricles. This is also called the fasciculus atrioventricularis. It goes through the cardiac skeleton. What is a cardiac skeleton? You have a hint here.
It's like cartilaginous basis.
Hmm?
Is it like cartilaginous basis around which the heart is built?
This is actually a dense connective tissue. Did you know that? No? So, okay, let's.
Skeleton of heart?
Yeah, this is like a skeleton of the heart, but what it is exactly?
Fibers.
Connective tissue or something like that?
Yeah, so this is, as I said, the dense connective tissue. So as you see here, this is the His bundle, yes? It connects what? What does it connect?
The atria and the ventricles?
Yes, the atrias and the ventricles. So let's look at this from the top of it. Let's just cut it off, okay? Let's cut the whole upper side off, okay? Do you agree with me or not? Are you also so radical? Let's just cut it off. Cut the atrias off. We will have only our ventricles, and let's look on top of it. We have our patient, we have our heart. We cut it off and look from on top of it, okay? So what we will see? We will see the valves actually. Because actually we will see the valves. Here are they. We just cut it off and see the valves from the top of it. Okay, so this is a dense connective tissue which actually encircles these valves, as you see here. And what it does, it isolates the atrias and the ventricles. But why do we need this additional isolation? We have this delay here to make this coordinated work. It will also contribute to this coordinated work, to this coordinated contraction. But why do we actually need this additional isolation? Does it make sense at all or not?
Just for the signal will spread in a proper way, not as it was. Right.
Because the signal can spread, not as I said, yes, it's like particular answer, because the signal can actually spread also between the contractile myocytes. So as you see here, I told you about the conduction system, about the pacemaker cells, but these contractile myocytes can also communicate. So between this part and this part, or for example this part and this part, so I mean between the myocytes of the atrias and of the ventricles, we need this isolation. Did you get it or not?
It's like wire isolation. So you have a wire, you have to isolate.
Yeah. So this his bundle, as you see here, this green thing, I hope you see it, this green thing is the only one place where the signal goes through this cardiac skeleton, through this isolation. Here, it's here. After that, it goes in the septum interventriculare and divides into crus dextrum and crus sinistrum. And after that, it divides into Purkinje fibers, which actually supplies the signal the whole ventricle. So, mnemotechnics. Just you need to memorize this. The SA note is like a DJ, and the AV note is like a traffic cop. He's like stop, you are arrested, please show me your documents, or something like that. Okay, did you get it or not? The pacemaker cells. They aren't neurons, as I said, but modified cardiomyocytes. So, the pacemaker cells and the actual contractile myocytes, they both are cardiomyocytes. But the pacemaker cells, they are modified cardiomyocytes. What does it mean? They possess more cytoplasm and very few rudimentary myofilaments. Because like normally myocytes, they have like a lot of myofilaments. Which myofilaments? Actin and myosin. So this is like, if they have a lot of these myofilaments, they have less cytoplasm. And in this case, we have very few rudimentary myofilaments and a lot of cytoplasm. So which cells actually in our body have also a lot of cytoplasm? You have a hint. Neurons. So why is it important to have a lot of cytoplasm inside of the cell? So they are like conducting parts of our body, yes? The pacemaker cells and the neurons. So why is it so important to have a lot of cytoplasm? Does it actually make sense?
Storage of ions, I think, or the solution and basically the molecules. So you can have more in the vesicles.
This is also actually a particular answer, because I would say the cytoplasm has a low resistance for the ion flow. So if we speak about the electricity and all of this stuff, this is always about the ions, about the flow of the ions inside of the cells. I will explain it later. But if we have a lot of myofilaments, it doesn't make sense because these ions don't have so much cavity for that. But if you have a lot of cytoplasm, which has this low resistance for these ions, which can just flow, so it is going to be like this is going to be make sense, yes? To make sense. And because of these very few rudimentary myofilaments, they can actually contract, but a little bit. But this is not the point. The point is that they can generate action potential without any innervation. So you can just excite the heart, just put it in this solution, so it will beat without any innervation, without this vagus, without this sympathetic system, without all of that. Because we don't need it. Everything you need is actually the ions, the energy, and the solution. So the ions will be in the solution. Okay, the cardiomyocytes, contractile myocytes. So as I said, we have two types of cardiomyocytes. The pacemaker cells, which I described before, and the actual contractile myocytes. They look like normal myocytes actually, but they have only a few differences. As you see here, they have this cell membrane, yes? This is a cell membrane. So it's like we just cut this cell membrane. So this here, as you see, do you see this tube? Mm-hmm. This is a T-tubule. This is actually, what is a T-tubule? You can see it. What is this actually? What is a T-tubule? You see the color. What is this?
Like continuation of sarcolemma?
Yes, this is like invagination of it. Mm-hmm. So yes, this is a continuation of sarcolemma. So it just goes, and after that it makes this invagination inside of itself, inside of the actual myocyte. Inside of the cell we have these myofilaments, which are actually this actin and myosin here, which are marked in white and black. And we have this sarcoplasmic reticulum. What is the sarcoplasmic reticulum?
Storage of calcium.
It's modified type.
So this is a storage of calcium, and this is a network. So actually our sarcoplasmic reticulum has two parts. It has the network sarcoplasmic reticulum, for example, here, 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 all of that stuff, and the junctional sarcoplasmic reticulum. This junctional sarcoplasmic reticulum will be really, really important for us. So this junctional sarcoplasmic reticulum makes a junction between this storage, between this intracellular storage of calcium and the actual cell membrane and the T-tubule, and this is called the diet. The diet is actually this junctional sarcoplasmic reticulum plus the T-tubule. Is it clear? Did you get it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and these myofilaments, we know actually these are actin and myosin. So they make a sarcomere, which is actually between these two Z lines. Okay, these pictures are created by myself because I'm a perfectionist, so I didn't find the right pictures, so I did it by myself. The gap junctions, or nexus, yes? We have our pacemaker cell and contractile myocytes, so they can communicate through these gap junctions. What are the gap junctions? The gap junctions, as you see here, they are like, they are like just two tubes, like this. This part and this part, they are called connexons, and each connexon has 6 connexins. It's pretty easy. So these pacemaker cells and contractile myocyte communicate through this gap junction, through this nexus. So where do we have them? We have them between the pacemaker cells, between two pacemaker cells, between a pacemaker cell and a contractile myocyte, which is going to be crucial for the spreading of action potential, and between the contractile myocytes. Charges. We know about the charges. Vlad explained you the charges. We always have outside of the cell a positive charge, a more positive charge, and inside of the cell a negative charge. This is what you need to memorize, because this is going to be the crucial thing for the action potential. Outside positive, inside negative. Are these cells polarized or not?
Yeah.
Hmm?
If there is a current, they have to be polarized or something like that.
Oh, there's a difference of charges.
So this polarized state is about the charges, not about the. It's a result of the current, but it's not about the current. So actually, I thought, and you probably think also, that I thought like we speak always about the polarized cells, something is polarized, something is not, and I didn't really understand what is actually polarized. What does it mean? So the polarized means that we have these two poles, this positive pole and this negative pole, okay? And polarized also means that the difference between these poles, the difference between these inner poles and these outer poles is big. So the polarized means a big difference between the charges. Not only if you have like different charges, so because sometimes you have different charges, but the difference is like, for example, 5 millivolts. But it's not a polarized state, it's de-polarized state, because the difference is not so big. But if you have like the difference is like -60 or -80 or -90, I don't know. So this is the polarized state. The difference between this minus side and this positive side is big. Let's speak about the membrane potential. What is a membrane potential?
Charges outside and inside the cell.
You have a hint? You did a small mistake, which I also did actually at the very first start as I started to learn this. What is the problem? Hmm? What can this be? And this an outer charge or an inner charge? Inner charge. It's actually logical. So it's the difference, yes, it's a difference, but the thing is, the difference is between the inner charge and the outer charge, not between the outer charge and inner charge. Okay? Did you get it? But actually, this is pretty tricky. This is a pretty tricky thing about this difference. So if we say, and this is, if we will speak about the charge, we will speak about the millivolts. If you will increase the inner charge, you will increase the membrane pressure, the membrane potential. Yes or not? This is what our math says. So it is going to be a positive deflection of the graph. Why? Let's mean for this tutorial. Let us mean that the membrane potential is only this inner charge. Let's speak only about the charge inside of the cell. I don't like these differences. They are too complicated to understand the things. To understand the things, the logic of these things, just let us mean, when we speak about the membrane potential, let us mean only the inner charge. Only what we have here, okay? Let's just deal, okay? So, let's speak about the inner charge. If you will increase the inner charge, the charge inside of the cell, so the graph, which actually shows you a membrane potential, will increase or decrease. Increase. And if you will decrease an inner charge, you will have a decrease of the membrane potential. So let's say that the membrane potential is actual charge of the cell inside of the cell. Okay, it's pretty easy. So if we will just increase it, the graph will go upwards, and if we will decrease it, it will go downwards. Ion concentrations. This is going to be also crucial for understanding of the action potential. Sodium and calcium are always outside of the cell. We also have sodium and calcium inside of the cell, but the concentrations are too small. So we have a big concentrations of sodium and of calcium outside of the cell, and a big concentration of potassium inside of the cell. And the same thing is here, and for example, the same thing is with neurons. So it's actually a common thing for all. And you need to memorize this. I will ask you about it later. Sodium and calcium outside of the cell, potassium inside of the cell. Equilibrium potential of potassium. Here, potassium inward rectifier. As I understood from the previous lecture, from the previous tutorial, the here was a really tricky thing, and nobody understood it actually, or did somebody understand how does it really works? How does it function? Can anybody explain it?
So it's
because I'm going to explain it. Yeah.
Yes. So it's a constant transmission of ions, and
okay.
the potassium sodium pump is on the opposite. It's like.
But we are not speaking about it. Let's speak only about the Kier. What is Kier? What is this? Potassium inward rectifier. It's a channel or what? It's a pump or what is it?
Channel.
Yes. It's a channel.
Okay. Allows the potassium ions to go outside, for example, or inside when it's needed to create this different concentration, the difference of the charges to create the membrane.
Yeah, you're right. You could.
The smart thing about Kier channels is that when the cell depolarizes, it turns out. We're letting the cell depolarize normally because the outward movement of potassium ions could repolarize it, which we do not need. So that's what I remember about it.
Okay, so let's imagine that we have in our cell membrane only Kier channel, only this potassium inward rectifier. This is actually a normal channel. We have a lot of potassium inside of the cell. Let's say that the membrane potential is minus 90 millivolts. Okay, it doesn't really matter, but minus 90. Okay, positive charge outside of the cell, negative charge inside of the cell. Let's say this is an additional minus here. I hope you see these two arrows here. This arrow shows us a chemical gradient. What is a chemical gradient? The chemical gradient is actually a concentrations gradient. So if we have a lot of potassium here and a small amount of potassium here, so the chemical gradient will tend to move this potassium outside of the cell because potassium tries to equalize these concentrations inside of the cell and outside of the cell. So the chemical gradient, it tries to equalize the concentrations, okay, inside the cell and outside the cell. Because of this chemical gradient, potassium, which we have a lot of potassium inside of the cell and a small amount outside of the cell. So potassium will go out to equalize itself outside of the cell and inside of the cell. Is it clear? It's pretty logical actually, pretty easy, or isn't it? Yes or not?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, but actually we have another gradient. This gradient is called electrical gradient. Do you see this small arrow here? This here?
Yes.
Electrical gradient. If we say that potassium, which is actually positively charged, goes out of the cell, yes? And let's speak about the charges. As I mentioned before, we have this negative charge inside of the cell, and the potassium is positively charged. So the positively charged particles, what do we know from physics, from the school? Positively charged particles and this negative charge, they attract each other. So the positively charged particle, when the potassium will go out, some of the potassium will come in. But the electrical gradient here is smaller than the chemical gradient. Is it clear? This arrow is bigger than this. It's pretty logical, no? Isn't it?
Yes.
So the electrical gradient in this case is smaller than the chemical gradient. So in this case, we will have more efflux, more potassium which is going out than the potassium which is going in. So the netto movement of the potassium will be outside. The electrochemical gradient, the sum of chemical and electrical gradient, will be directed outside of the cell. Okay? Is it clear? It's pretty logical thing. Any questions? Okay. Some potassium ions leak out of the cell. Just let's imagine it. Some potassium ions leak out of the cell. Here is our potassium, it goes out. So, our potassium is actually positively charged. So, if we mean by membrane potential an inner charge, and our cell loses these positively charged particles, these positively charged potassiums, so the membrane potential will increase or decrease? Increase or decrease? Why decrease?
It will be more negative.
Yes, because it just loses positively charged particles. So if you lose something, you get more negative. Yes, if you lose something positive, you get more negative. It's like about the businessmen. When they are losing money, they are getting more poor. Yes, and if they are getting money, they are getting more rich. It's actually the whole thing. So if you lose these positively charged particles, this positive thing, if you lose it, you get more negative. So the membrane potential will decrease. Yes? And this is what you see here. From minus 90 millivolts, it gets to minus 91 millivolts. Yes? It doesn't make sense? It is a decrease of membrane potential. It is the decrease of inner charge of the cell. Okay? So, as you see here, if we moved out this potassium, what is going to happen with our chemical and electrical gradient? Let's speak about this easy thing, about this chemical gradient, about this concentrations gradient. It will increase or decrease? Decrease or increase?
Decrease.
Decrease? Why decrease?
Because we have more potassium inside and less outside. We lose from inside to outside. So
Yeah, so it just tries to equalize itself. So if it does, the force gets smaller. Because this difference between this intracellular potassium and the outer environment, this difference between these concentrations of potassium inside of the cell and outside of the cell is smaller now. So because of this smaller difference, we have smaller chemical gradient. Okay, and the electrical gradient increase. Why increase?
Because we increase the difference between our potassium channel, potassium goes out, right? So outside of the cell is more positive, and inside the cell it's like less negative.
So if we just, as you see here, the chemical gradient will decrease, as you see here, it's smaller than here, and the electrical gradient is going to increase. Why? Because our potassium went out, he is actually here, so it is actually now more positive outside of the cell, and inside of the cell it is more negative. So we have this bigger difference. It was minus 90 millivolts a difference, now it's minus 91. Is it logical? Is it easy for you or not?
Yes.
Pretty easy. Okay. So after 4 times of this some potassium ions leak out of the cell about this. After 4 times by minus 94 millivolts, because we had from minus 90 to minus 91, after 4 times you'll have minus 94, potassium reaches its equilibrium potential. So the potassium goes out till these 2 arrows, this will decrease, this will increase, and at one point at minus 94 millivolts, these 2 arrows will be equal. The chemical gradient will be equal to electrical gradient. Is it clear? So, if we speak about the chemical and the electrical gradient, we always mean the efflux and the influx. The potassium, this is a dynamic of this channel. So, if the chemical gradient and the electrical gradient will be same, and so it will be equal, then the efflux, the potassium which is going out, will be equal to influx, to potassium which is going in. Okay? Although we have still a lot of potassium inside of the cell, because we have this electrical gradient. Okay? So these 2 forces now are equal. This is what they meant with this equilibrium potential. The equilibrium potential is when the chemical and electrical gradient are equal. So when the efflux and influx are equal. So let's say per minute 1,000 of potassiums go out and 1,000 of potassium come in. So this is the dynamics. A lot of potassium go out, a lot of potassiums come in. And this amount of these potassiums which are going out and going in, they are equal. It's clear. Okay, but the problem is that we have in reality other channels. We have in reality other channels. So, if we have only here, at one time we will have this equilibrium. But if we have other channels, like for example this sodium channel, which is marked here in green, and these stripes say us that the permeability of this channel is 10 times smaller than the permeability of this tricky thing. It's 10 times smaller. But what about this? But what about the chemical and electrical gradient of this sodium channel? Are they directed into the cell or outside of the cell? Are they directed into one direction or not? Sorry for that, for my English. Why? For one, yes, but why?
Because sodium is outside for 10 times more than inside, and electrical gradient is the same.
So for sodium, isn't it like electrical and chemical gradients are like vector is in one side, right?
Oh, sorry. Yes, the vector is directed into one side, into the cell. Why? Because sodium is positively charged. Yes. Let's speak first about the chemical gradient. We have a lot of sodium here, yes, outside of the cell, and a small amount here. So the chemical gradient will be directed inside of the cell, yes? We have electrical gradient. Sodium, which is positively charged, will tend to come in, because inside of the cell we have this negative charge. So these gradients are going to be directed into the cell. This is not about the potassium. Potassium has two different gradients. And in this case, if we have this channel, if we have other channels inside of the cell, then we will not have this equilibrium. In reality, potassium isn't at its equilibrium potential. So in reality, because of these channels, this chemical gradient will be always a little bit bigger at the resting state. We are speaking about the resting potential right now. At the resting state, the potassium will be a little bit bigger than the chemical gradient will be a little bit bigger than the electrical gradient. So what is going to be the sum of it? The electrochemical gradient. This is going to so you see the direction. The potassium will more go out than come in. So the efflux will be bigger than the influx. It was like basics, okay? You need to understand these things. If you have questions, so please ask about it right now, or forget it forever. Think about it. Does all of that make sense or not for you? Because I need you to understand it, all of that stuff. So, okay, no questions, no problems. Sodium, potassium, ATPase. We need always to maintain these concentrations. We need always to maintain the sodium outside of the cell and potassium outside of the cell. What did I say?
Outside.
Sorry. We need our sodium always have outside of the cell and potassium inside of the cell. Why do we need it? Because we will need it for action potential. Because at some voltages, we'll just open the channels. For example, for sodium, yes? We'll just say, okay, we will just knock on the door, the sodium channels will open, and the sodium will rush in. So it is going to be a depolarization. The graph will go upwards. Because if the positively charged particles come in, the membrane potential, the inner charge, is going to increase. It's logical thing. So we need, and if we will at one voltage just lock on this door, so the potassium channels will open, then this cell will lose potassium, and this cell will lose this positive charge. So it is going to be more negative inside of the cell. So this is going to be a repolarization. I will speak about it later. So we will need it for our action potentials. So this is why we need to maintain these concentrations. And this is what the sodium potassium ATPase does. It makes if the sodium comes in and potassium goes out, then at one moment all of the sodium will equalize itself, and maybe all of the potassium will also equalize itself. But it doesn't really matter. So we need the concentrations here of the sodium and here of potassium. So we need this maintenance of the concentrations. So this is why we need this sodium potassium ATPase, which does the opposite thing. The sodium comes in because of the actual nature, because of the chemical and electrical gradients, and after that, sodium potassium ATPase or sodium potassium pump says, you know what? No, you're not going to stay here. Let's push you out. So the potassium goes out, so the sodium potassium ATPase pushes this sodium which went out inside of the cell. But it's not natural, isn't it? It's actually not natural, because natural thing is about these chemical and electrical gradients. But this is not natural, so this is why you need energy. So this is why it's called sodium potassium ATPase, because it needs ATP. Why does it need ATP? Because it goes against the concentrations. It pushes the sodium outside of the cell, although we have a lot of sodium actually outside of the cell, and it pushes potassium inside of the cell, although we have a lot of potassium inside of the cell. So did you understand it or not?
Yes.
Okay, so this arrow shows you an electrochemical gradient. This is a sum of these gradients, of this chemical gradient and electrical gradient. This is a state of here at the resting state, because of this additional channel. Is it clear? Any questions? It was simple or not?
Simple.
I hope it was simple. What was not clear? Okay. Now, let's just sum everything up. This is a little bit complicated. Let's sum it up. Let's simplify it. Okay? More simplify it. We have our potassium. We have our electrochemical gradient. So the electrochemical gradient, which is sum of it, is directed outside of the cell. Yes?
Yes.
We have our sodium. The permeability is 10 times smaller than the potassium. But the thing is that the potassium comes only in. It doesn't go out. It goes out, but because of the sodium potassium ATPase, but it doesn't go out through this channel. So the potassium goes out, the sodium comes in, and the sodium potassium ATPase makes the opposite thing to it. It maintains the concentrations. It's clear?
Yes.
Find three differences. We spoke about, I told you about this contractile myocytes. This is pretty easy. This is like two channels in sodium potassium ATPase. Find here in pacemaker cell three differences.
Smart.
Two sodium channels.
Funny channel.
Funny channel, yes. What else?
There is any
No
Kechur
Kechur.
channel here.
No Kechur, yes, no Kechur.
And there's sodium inward channel. Oh no. And
So
resting
reverse-
potential.
junction.
And the resting potential, yes.
And now there's
So, we have three differences here. As you all mentioned, we have this funny channel, we don't have this here, and the resting potential is -60. I don't know, do you see this or not?
Yes.
Okay, here is -60, here is -85. Here was -85, sorry, I forgot to mention it. So, let's speak about all of this. This is a balance here. We have here a balance. We have potassium which is going out, sodium which is going in, and the sodium potassium ATPase which maintains these concentrations, which makes this opposite thing. So this is a balance. This balances this balances this, so everything balances itself, okay? It's pretty easy. But here we don't have our balance. Here we don't have our Kechur channel. So the potassium will not go out. We have other potassium channels, but they don't really matter for me in this tutorial. The main channel is here, so we don't have it. Here we don't have it. So we will not have this balance of this sodium channel. And we have an additional sodium channel. A really big and really strong guy, which if we will open the door, the sodium will just rush into the cell, which has a big permeability. So we have two sodium channels, so we have two currents of sodium which are going in, and no here. So we have no balance. Is it clear? Is it easy?
Yes.
Can I ask please, what is this funny channel triggers? Like it's voltage gated or ligand gated or suppression stretch? Like what's
You
turns
just
on?
have to laugh and then this channel will be
This- yeah.
activated.
It starts to laugh, yeah. A great question. Okay, I didn't want to explain you, but let's explain. Okay, this funny channel. As you see here, this funny channel is HCN. What does it mean? HCN is hyperpolarization activated cyclic nucleotide gated channel. Pretty weird, yes? Hyperpolarization activated,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
cyclic,
Uh-huh.
nucleotide
Go on.
gated.
Oh, yes.
Yes. So, can you repeat it?
Oh yeah.
No, don't read. Hyperpolarization activated cyclic nucleotide gated. So, it activates at what? At hyperpolarization. What is hyperpolarization, people? What is hyperpolarization?
It's when the resting potential decreases.
Yes, but the
Decreases.
repolarization is also a decrease of membrane potential. What is the difference between repolarization and hyperpolarization? Something like that. Do you know?
Lower than the resting potential.
Then yeah, lower than the resting potential. So let's say we have a graph. It goes upwards. After that, this is a depolarization. After that, it goes downwards. This is going to be a repolarization. So we had our resting state, our start state. So if this repolarization continues and it goes lower than it was before, if it goes lower, this is going to be a hyperpolarization. So this channel is activates by a hyperpolarization, but we actually don't have a hyperpolarization in a pacemaker cell. in the heart, only if we have the isolated cells. So I can explain you, but it is going to be a little bit complicated.
We can do it on
and why cyclic nucleotide? Does anybody know what is CAMP and what it does?
Secondary protein.
Yes, the messenger. What it does? It's the secondary messenger of what?
Protein
Transduction system.
A what? Of what?
So there's like a system, G protein system.
Yeah, it's like these cascades. Yeah. So why do we need it?
To activate protein kinases and
Yeah. Why do we need
to
it?
transmit the signals of the protein modulators.
Yeah, so it's a second messenger of which system?
Calcium.
It's sympathetic system, people. So the cyclic nucleotide is actually activated. This cyclic nucleotide activates these funny channels. So this is a CAMP. So I didn't want to explain these cascades. Just remember it. CAMP is a secondary messenger which actually activates these funny channels. And why it's called funny? Why it's called funny? It's pretty a weird thing for science. Yes, they are like always. This is a better name for science. That's like hyperpolarization activated cyclic nucleotide gated channel. This is like about the science, yes? But funny isn't about the science. Why do we need this name? And why it's so? Funny because it activates by a hyperpolarization. Because when we have a depolarization, let's say this is a depolarization. This is an increase of membrane potential. Yes. Let's say here we have one channels and here open other channels. So they open by a depolarization. They open here, for example. Here we have other channels which open. Yes. So they are also opening by a depolarization. So I mean these channels which are inwardly directed always open by a depolarization, but these channels open by actually at the end of repolarization, let's say by a hyperpolarization. Okay, but it was not the point. The point was that here we have no balance. Here we have the balance. Potassium goes out, sodium comes in. This is the maintenance of the concentrations. Here potassium doesn't go out. And here we have two sodiums which are going in. Okay? So we don't have the balance. So potassium will not balance the sodium which is coming in, and we have additional sodium which will go in inside of the cell. So I will mark this funny channel with this smile so you can understand this is a funny channel. Okay?
Yes.
Okay, so what about a resting membrane potential? As I said here, this is a resting membrane potential. This is a resting potential. This is a balance. If we have no balance, do we have a resting potential? It's a great question, isn't it? Do we have or not?
No.
Don't or not? Do we have it? We don't have it, yes? This is actually a pretty thing, an interesting thing. Because some people say we don't have a resting potential, and some people say we don't have a stable resting potential. Why? Because after the repolarization, when it will decrease, here at this state will activate these funny channels, and we will have another action potential. And here we'll activate the funny channels, and we will have another action potential. So actually, we don't have this plateau phase, like here, for example. We don't have this isoelectric line, for example. We don't have this resting state. We will have like thousands of action potentials or something like that, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say pacemaker cells have no stable resting potential. This is going to be like a little bit easier to understand. Let's say they have no stable resting potential because they have no balance. They have no here and two sodium channels. Two inwardly directed sodium channels. Is it clear?
Yes.
Okay, quick recap. Here balance, here sodium, potassium goes out, sodium comes in, sodium potassium ATPase makes the opposite thing. The resting membrane potential is -85. Here the resting membrane potential is -60 millivolts. Sodium comes in, we have additional sodium which is going in, and we have no here, so we have no balance. Now a break. After the break, let's speak about action potentials. Okay, we have our membrane potential, which is here in millivolts, and here is time. Okay, as I said before, we had here an action potential like this, so it goes downwards, 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 and we will have not a resting state, because here, after a repolarization of action potentials, for example, here, here, the fine channels open. So what does it mean? If we have a lot of sodium, which are outside of the cell, and we knock on the door, so the door opens, and the sodium tries to equalize the concentrations outside of the cell and inside of the cell. So they are trying to come in, yes? Because we have a lot of sodium outside, small amount of sodium inside. So if we open the door, if we open these fine channels, sodium comes in because it tries to equalize the concentrations. Clear? So if the positive particles, like sodium, which is positively charged, comes into the cell gets more positive or gets more negative? More positive. So the membrane potential will increase. Yes? It's a pretty logical thing. This is why it goes upwards. After that, we have the fine channels don't really close. As you see here, they start from the minus 60 millivolts, which are membrane potential, which are actually this no stable resting potential. At minus 60 millivolts, they go upwards, upwards, upwards. They don't close, but we have another channel. This channel is a calcium channel. This is called a T-type calcium channel. So the calcium comes into the cell. Calcium is positively charged. Calcium comes in. The inner charge gets bigger, so it gets more positive. Yes? Does it make sense? So it also goes upwards. Why it's called T-type? T because they are for a short period of time, so they are transient. They come only transiently, only for a short period of time into the cell. So I will spoiler you that the T-type calcium channels open here and they will close here, and the fine channels also will close here. So this is only a short period of time when we have these T-type calcium channels. So they are transiently for a short period of time. After that, in our pacemaker cells, we have another situation. We have also calcium, which is coming in, but through other channels. These channels are called L-type calcium channels. The same thing, positively charged calcium comes in, inner charge gets bigger, so the membrane potential, the inner charge, will increase. And the L-type, why it's called L-type? Logic? Long, yes. So look, it's long, pretty long.
Excuse me?
More than 15 milliseconds, yes? After that, look, what do we have here? It was like minus 60 millivolts at the very first start, yes? Now it's plus 10 millivolts. So we have here an opposite situation. Positively charged particles like sodium, calcium, and this calcium, they came in. So the inner charge is now positive and the outer charge is negative. Why the outer charge is now negative?
Because it loses the positive charge.
Yes, because they were from which environment, from which, I don't know, universe come these sodium and calcium. They come from here. They come from the extracellular environment into the intracellular. It's pretty logically. So if you here lose a positive charges in form from sodium and calcium, then it gets more negative. And this, then, if it becomes positive charge, it becomes more positive. It's like really logically, people. It's really logically. But why? So this is actually an initiation. So the initiation, why it's initiation? Because it gets to this threshold. This line, minus 40 millivolts, is a threshold. A threshold, when we reach a threshold, we have action potential. This is the thing, what we need to do. We need to reach a threshold, and once we reach a threshold, we have an action potential. And if we have an action potential, we have everything. If we don't, we haven't anything. We have nothing. Sorry for my English. So, here, at this threshold, starts the action potential. If it doesn't reach the threshold, it will not start an action potential. For example, here. Yes? It's pretty simple. So, what I wanted to say, this part of an action potential which goes to the threshold is called initiation. And this is a depolarization. Let's say this everything. It's actually a pretty tricky thing. Let's say everything is depolarization, but this part is also called an initiation. Okay, it's going to be more simplified. So why it's called depolarization? Why do we need these terms? What does it mean, a depolarization? Because actually, as I said before, polarized means not only two different poles, but it also means a big difference. Yes. So, for example, here the difference was 60. Yes. And as you see here, we have plus 10. We had minus 60. 60 is a lot, yes? And plus 10 is a small, is not so big. Yes, as you know. Yeah. So why it's called a depolarization? Because the difference, not only the charges are now opposite, the difference between the charges is now much smaller. It was 60 and now it's 10. So if the polarized state, if it is a state where we have two poles and a big difference, so now we have also two poles. But these poles are opposite to this, which are here, and this difference is only 10. So it's not so polarized, yes? So it's depolarized. It's logic. And after that, I will spoiler you that after that it will go downwards. Okay, let's think about it. If it will go downwards, yes? If it will go downwards, so if it's membrane potential, then the inner charge is going also to decrease, yes? If it goes downwards, the membrane potential decreases, yes? It's pretty simple. So, if it decreases, if it goes downwards, who will go out? We will have only one option. Who can go out? Why not sodium or calcium, for example?
Because
the channels are still busy.
Because of the concentration. Sodium because of concentration.
But we have sodium and calcium. They're open here, here, and here. But why it goes upwards? People, it's a pretty logical thing. Everything is logical in physiology. It goes here upwards. Why it goes upwards? Because positively charged particles come into the cell. Cell gets more positive. Pretty simple. And here, if we lose, if something goes out, and if we mean by this something a cation, I will say you that who will go out is potassium. Why potassium? Because as I said before, let's speak here about the concentrations. We have a lot of sodium and calcium outside of the cell, so if we knock on the door, they come in. The door opens and they come in. So if we will actually, yes. So if we will open these doors, we have a lot of potassium inside of the cell, so it will go outside. This is pretty simple. I mean by all these channels, for example, this isn't here. I want to say you that these are actually these aren't the channels which are at resting potential except with this. These are other channels which are opening at different voltages. So these channels are action potential channels. They are closed at rest. They are closed at resting potential. So this is not here. Here is only for us important only for resting potential. Okay? This is not here. The second thing what I wanted to say, why here is an arrow which is why is here only one arrow? Why don't we have here this electrical gradient?
Because now this cell is depolarized.
Yeah, exactly. So first we have this chemical gradient, which is pretty simple. A lot of potassium inside of the cell, small amount of potassium outside of the cell, so it goes to equalize itself. And we have our electrical gradient. So this potassium is positively charged, and here is the negative pole. So it goes to the negative pole. It's simple, yes?
Yeah.
Is it simple?
Yes.
Okay, so let's speak about this particular situation.
Sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt you, but like from the logic perspective, I think it will be more efficient to like lose the calcium, for example. I know that it's a low concentration, but it will be more efficient because it have two positive charges on the same time, and so the electrical
I know what you mean.
the electrochemical gradient will be
So you mean it would be more logical to lose calcium than potassium?
yeah, because it's have two charges, two positive charges.
So first of all, the concentration of calcium inside of the cell is like 0.0000. I don't know how many zeros are there, but a lot. So the calcium channels addressed aren't a lot are closed actually, or let's say not enough permeable. So if you have like not 2 plus, let's say 100 plus, okay? But what matters here is amount of these cations which just go up, and not the charge, okay?
What channel is it? This potassium channel? It's an invert rectifier.
Okay. I will explain it. This is a voltage gated channel. It's called delayed. How it's called?
Delayed rectifier.
Delayed rectifier, yes. It's called, it is a voltage gated channel which is delayed rectifier. But I don't know, do you need it actually? I don't know. It's a delayed rectifier potassium channel. So let's speak about this.
Slow walk in channel 1.
Yeah, so this is a slow walk, yes, because it starts and it goes really slowly, and this potassium tries to go out and so on. Okay, let's speak about this particular situation. This was an initiation, yes? This is a depolarization. Let's speak now about this part, about repolarization. Why it's repolarization? Because we had a small difference here, plus 10, and now it's a big difference, minus 60. So now we have the same thing. We have this inner charge, which was the same thing, which was at rest. So at this no stable rest, yes? Inside negative, outside positive, yes? Let's speak about this situation. We are now at the end of the repolarization. And what occurs here, we don't have this rest. We don't have this isoelectric line. Why? Because I have already explained it. Normally, if we have a rest, we have this isoelectric line. Potassium goes out, sodium comes in, it maintains the concentrations, so nothing really happens. Membrane potential doesn't really changes. But what we have in pacemaker cell, we are talking about the pacemaker cell. We have now here, we have this additional funny channel. And this additional funny channel activates here at the end of repolarization. Actually, we can't say that this is, I don't know how to say it, because actually people say that this is a hyperpolarization. But hyperpolarization is when the membrane potential gets lower than it was before. But it doesn't really get lower. So it's actually at the end of repolarization. But if you will isolate these cells, for example, the pacemaker cells, you will have this hyperpolarization, so it will go downwards, and these funny channels will activate. It's a little bit complicated, so you can forget about it. Because I want you to understand the things, okay? So if you didn't understand this, so try to understand and not to just memorize like hundred of channels or something like that. So here, at the end of repolarization, funny channels activate. And these funny channels, why are they funny channels? Because look, for example, T-type or L-type, they activate by a depolarization. For example, here activates the T-type, here it closes, and here activates the L-type. It's pretty logical. We need to prolong this depolarization, which goes actually upwards. Yes, pretty simple. So they open by a depolarization. But what opens here is this funny channel. They open by a, let's say, hyperpolarization, or at the end of repolarization. Yeah?
What's the total time for such an action potential in the pacemaker cell?
I didn't mention, but I will say it after the lecture.
300 milliseconds.
If you, this is actually, yeah.
It's the pacemaker cell, not the cardiomyocyte, okay? This prolonged potential is in cardiomyocyte, but not in the pacemaker cells. It depends on where you are.
Yes, actually, yes, because
in which part? Are you the side node in the sinoatrial
yeah,
node?
this is a
or
great
AV node,
answer.
his bundle, or Purkinje cell?
Because why is not the sinoatrial the primary pacemaker? It's not because it's on the top of it. It's because it has the biggest velocity of action potentials. This is why the velocity of the signal is pretty high. And let's say if the AV node can also product an action potential, it can also have an action potential, but the velocity will be smaller. So this is why it doesn't really make sense. So this is why we use this biggest velocity. Okay? Any other questions? No? Okay. So here at the end of repolarization, activate these funny channels, and we have another action potential. So we don't have this rest at all. So what we will have in this cell, we will have something like this, always like this. You see here, initiation, depolarization, repolarization, initiation, depolarization, repolarization. So we will have like action potentials, and they will not stop for just for a millisecond or something like that. We will always have this dynamic because of these funny channels, which will flow in, and because we have no here, which will balance it. Is it clear?
Yes.
Let's go further. Action potential of pacemaker cell, I already explained it to you. So let's speak about this particular situation, about this depolarization. Yes, as I said before, inner charge is now positive, outer charge is negative. So this is a depolarized state. Is it clear? Okay, and rest, how is it rest? It's the opposite thing, yes? Inside is negative, outside is positive, yes? So let's say that the pacemaker cell is now depolarized, is now like in action potential, and the contractile myocyte is now at rest because it didn't receive a signal, yes? Let's speak about it. Pacemaker cell is now depolarized, inside of the cell is positive, outside is negative, and at rest, here we have a contractile myocyte, and contractile myocyte is now at rest. So inside of the cell, we have this negative charge, and outside of the cell, we have this positive charge. So let's concentrate on this, let's focus on this particular charge. Inside of the cell, positive, here is negative. Yes? So which charged particles do we have in our cell? For example, ions, yes? Which ions? What does it mean?
Potassium chloride.
Okay, so it's like cations, yes? They are cations. And we have also anions. Don't forget about it. Okay, so if we have this difference, yes? This here is positive, here is negative, and we have our gap junctions, which are actually permeable for ions. So let's speak about our cations. They will go from the positive charge to the negative charge because of the electricity. What is electricity?
Flow of charge.
Directional movement of charge particles.
Yeah, exactly. This is what we learned in school. This is like directed movement of charged particles. cations are charged particles or not?
Yeah.
Okay, if we have here positive and here negative, and here the cations are positively charged, so positively charged particles attract to the negative charge. Yes?
Yes.
So this is why they go from pacemaker cell to contractile myocyte through these gap junctions. Is it clear?
Yep.
So we have depolarization, we have this change here of charges, and after that these cations start to flow from the pacemaker cell to actual contractile myocyte, and it will make this initiation because we have this contractile myocyte, it receives these cations, so the inner charge is getting more positive or more negative? More positive, because it receives positive charge. So it will increase or decrease, I mean the membrane potential, I mean this graph. It will go upwards.
Decrease, yes.
It will go upwards. Yes, it will increase, it will go like this. So where do the anions go? This is a logical thing, people.
Opposite direction?
Yes, in opposite direction, because they are like the anions are negatively charged, so they come to the positive charge. Okay, it's pretty simple. It is simple or not?
Yes.
Okay. Now we have the threshold, because cations come into the cell, they come into the contractile myocyte, so the action potential, so we have this initiation of an action potential. Look, now we speak about the action potential of contractile myocyte. These cations come from the pacemaker cell to contractile myocyte. Contractile myocyte gets a little bit more positive, so it goes upwards. It goes upwards. The graph goes upwards. So the membrane potential, I mean the inner charge of the cell, gets more positive. After that, guess who comes in? You have only two options. Who can come in?
Sodium and calcium.
Yeah. Sodium or calcium, yes? I will spoiler you, this is going to be a sodium. And I will spoiler you that this is going to be a fast channel. It's called so. It's called a fast sodium channel. So if it's time, will it go like this, or like this? I mean, okay, two options. Like this or like this. This is option 1, this is option 2. What do you choose?
One.
Option 1, because it doesn't really need so much time. So look, sodium, which is positively charged, comes into the cell gets more gets more positive. This inner charge gets more positive. Sodium comes in through these fast sodium channels, and we have now this depolarized state. This depolarized state, inside positive, outside negative. It's pretty simple. After that, it will decrease. It will go downwards. So who can go out?
Potassium.
Potassium can go out. Okay. And this is a potassium. So I wanted also to say you that this is an initiation because it gets to the threshold. After that we have an action potential. So this is a depolarization, and this is called an early repolarization because we will have two parts of repolarization. Okay. This is early repolarization. Potassium goes out, the cell loses its positive charge, so it will decrease, so it will go downwards. Yes, a question?
Which kind of channels for potassium do we have here in this crystal?
Once more?
What type of channel for potassium?
This is ITO. This is inward transient. This is transient outward potassium channel. Transient because it's for a short period of time, and the outward because potassium goes out. So transient outward. After that, we will have a plateau phase. Plateau phase is nothing else as is like let's say an isoelectric line. So as I said, it goes downwards, it goes to this zero, and after that nothing really changes. Why? Because through this L type was what? L was what? Long. Calcium comes in, the cell gets more positive, and the potassium goes out, and this and the calcium which is coming in is equal to potassium which is going out. So nothing really happens. we have here this plateau phase, this isoelectric phase, this isoelectric line, when this influx of calcium is equal to this efflux of potassium, as you see here. After that, it will decrease. It will go downwards. So who can what? So now please say you. You need to say what will happen actually.
What was the calcium?
De-polarization.
No, I mean who and where will it go?
Sodium. Calcium channels.
Potassium was the right answer, and what will
Calcium channels will close and potassium channels will be still open. So
Yeah.
it will be regular.
Yeah, exactly. So here these L-type channels close. These L-type channels close. Let's say they start to close, and these potassium channels they don't really close. So this is why potassium will go out of the cell. So the cell loses its positive charge, so it gets more negative. So this is why we have this repolarization. So repolarization, what is called repolarization, here was plus 20, so it's a small difference. Here is minus 85. Minus 85, that's a lot, isn't it? So it is a polarized state. We have a big difference. And now we have this rest. Inner charge is negatively charged, outer charge is positively charged, sorry, but it is so. So initiation, depolarization, early repolarization, plateau phase. So this plateau phase is this isoelectric line at about 0 millivolt, plateau phase, and after that repolarization. And we have here our resting potential. We have this contractile myocyte can really rest here. Why? So let's say this sodium came in, yes? Let's forget about this calcium for a minute. Let's forget about this calcium. We have our sodium and our potassium. Sodium came in, potassium went out, and here. So, but as I said, we need to maintain the concentrations. Why? Because if we will open the door, for example here, we need a lot of sodium here, and this sodium will come in because of the chemical gradient, okay? So we need to have these concentrations. We need to have a lot of sodium and calcium outside of the cell and a lot of potassium inside of the cell. So if here sodium comes into the cell and potassium goes out of the cell, so we need this sodium-potassium ATPase, like at rest, it will maintain the concentrations. So this sodium which came in and potassium which went out, now these 3 sodiums go out and 2 potassiums can come in. So this is how this sodium-potassium ATPase works. It maintains the concentrations. Okay, and now we have this polarized state. As I said, it is polarized, so it is at rest. Yes?
Little question, because I know the thing, but I don't know if it's true or not. Where goes this calcium cation that go inside the cell? Where it goes next? It go out of the cell, or it goes into the endoplasmatic reticulum?
This is a great question. This is the best question you can ask. So this is a great question because I wanted also to ask you. So you do my job actually. Where did the calcium go? We know we have the sodium-potassium ATPase, which pushes the sodium which went in outside of the cell and potassium inside of the cell. So where did the calcium go? This is, yeah, it was good. Who said tubes? Who said tubes? It was great. Okay. As I said before, do you remember the diet? What they explained to you? We have this cell membrane, and we have this invagination of cell membrane, which comes into the cell, like into the inside of the cell, and it communicates with first of all, with this sarcoplasmic reticulum. This is a network, and this is a junctional sarcoplasmic reticulum. So they have a junction between junctional sarcoplasmic reticulum and the T-tubule, which is actually an invagination of cell membrane. So this is called a diet, and this is a crucial thing. So what do we have now? We have an action potential of pacemaker cell, yes? By a depolarized state, the cations from the pacemaker cell flow to the contractile myocyte, yes? So they initiate this initiation. So this is how the action potential of contractile myocyte works. After that we have this action potential from contractile myocyte. So this is like a way, a pathway of signal. We need first to produce the signal, to get it from pacemaker cells to contractile myocyte, and this signal needs to get to this threshold. So this is how it works. And now, what we need from the contractile myocytes, why do we need them? Yes, to contract. Okay, so we speak actually about these ions, about this flow, about this current, about all of these channels, but actually we don't need it. We just need the heart to contract coordinately. So this is what do we need, nothing else. Let's speak about this particular situation. T-tubule is part of cell membrane. It has a contact to junctional sarcoplasmic reticulum. Here, cell membrane of this contractile myocyte. The cell membrane invaginates into the cell. So this is called a T-tubule, this invagination. Then after that goes up. This is our, this is the inner environment of the cell. This is our sarcoplasmic reticulum. Our sarcoplasmic reticulum is a calcium storage. Everything okay? Okay. Do you see everything or not? Okay. Our sarcoplasmic reticulum is a calcium storage. It has a lot of calcium. As I said before, we have our NSR network, NSR network sarcoplasmic reticulum. Now, is it clear? Everything clear? Sorry. You have our network sarcoplasmic reticulum and junction. Here, network sarcoplasmic reticulum and junctional. They have a lot of calcium. This calcium is associated with a calcium binding protein. It's called calsequestrin. Pretty complicated, but it's called so. Calsequestrin is inside of this sarcoplasmic reticulum and it binds this calcium. It holds it. It holds it. Calcium, as I said before, we have this action potential, yes? We have this L-type calcium channels, yes? During the action potential of contractile myocyte, L-type calcium channels. So a lot of L-type calcium channels are inside of the T-tubule. So this calcium comes through these L-type calcium channels. They're also called LTCC, or DHP channel. DHP is like the dehydropyridine channel. So this calcium, during the action potential, this calcium comes through these L-type calcium channels and it binds to the ryanodine receptor. Ryanodine receptor is like a door. So if this calcium knocks on the door, knocks on this ryanodine receptor, it opens. And this calsequestrin says, okay, goodbye my calcium, goodbye, just go, I don't need you at all. So this calcium comes through this L-type channels, binds to ryanodine receptor, calsequestrin says, okay, go, and this calcium goes out. And 85% of calcium, which we will need for the contraction, will go from this sarcoplasmic reticulum. And this process is called calcium-induced calcium release. Why? Because calcium comes in and it induces another calcium, a lot of calcium, to go out, to be released. It's pretty simple, isn't it? Okay. So 85% of calcium, which we will need for the contraction, will go out from this junctional SR. And 15% of calcium will come just directly from this L-type calcium channels. And the calcium will, after that, attach to troponin C. What is troponin C? What is this? It's what?
Protein.
Protein
Which enables the muscles to contract.
Enables the muscles to contract, yes? Yeah, it's actually, yes, I would agree with you and I agree with you. So, let's repeat it. Calcium comes in, binds to ryanodine receptor, calcium goes out. So it's called the calcium-induced calcium release. And some of the calcium comes directly. And this calcium attaches to troponin C. let's speak about this myofilaments. What is actually troponin C and how does it work? Our myofilaments. This is actin, yes? We know it. We know it, people. I hope you know it, yes?
Yes.
Do you know it?
Yes,
Okay.
we know it.
This is actin. This green thing is actin. This is myosin, yes? Let's speak about this particular situation. Let's look at this actin here. We have 2 chains of actin, yes? It's pretty simple. One chain and the second chain. Also, hello? Yeah. Also, we have this troponin C and the tropomyosin. Tropomyosin connects to this troponin C, so it's like one system. And here also, troponin C and the tropomyosin. The thing is, and here you see the myosin heads. You see here, the myosin has heads, and if we look at this particular situation, the heads are here and here. So this is a myosin head, and this is a myosin head. The thing is that this troponin C and this tropomyosin, they cover the binding sites of actin. So actually, what do we need for the contraction? We need first the myosin to connect to this. First, we need these myosin heads to connect to binding sites of actin. But if they are covered, if these binding sites of actin are covered, we cannot really make a contraction. So this is a prevention of contractions. But if the calcium, we will increase the concentration of calcium inside of the cytoplasm. If this calcium-induced calcium release works, and this calcium goes out, and we will have a lot of calcium in the cytoplasm, this calcium will bind to this troponin C, and this is why this troponin C and this tropomyosin will relocate into the groove between these 2 chains. It will just like deviate from this into this groove. So this is how it works, and this is how these binding sites are now free. So this is a great thing because we can make a contraction. Is it clear?
Yes.
And all this is what we need because of these L-type calcium channels. Calcium comes in, binds, calcium goes out, calcium-induced calcium release. We have a lot of calcium, and this calcium binds to this troponin C, relocates this tropomyosin, so the binding sites are now free. Okay, now we all know it. How does it work? How does this contraction works? This is myosin. This is myosin head. This is actin. This was the troponin C and this is the tropomyosin. These chains. So now the binding sites are now free. So the myosin connects to actin, and they form a cross bridge, as you see here. This is a myosin head. It also has this ATP and PI. After that, myosin bends. You see it here, and releases this ATP and P. After that, ATP attaches to myosin, as you see here, and myosin head detaches. So we don't have this cross bridge anymore. And after that, myosin bends back to its active cocked position, and ATP hydrolyzes. As you see here, we had an ATP, and it hydrolyzes into ATP and P. So this is how it works. First, you need the myosin to make a cross bridge with actin. This is the head of myosin. It makes the cross bridge with actin. Yes? After that, it bends. After that, it detaches and bends once more, and contacts with the actin once more. After that, bends, detaches, contracts, bends, detaches. So this is how they are like sliding into each other. So this is how the contraction works. As you see here, it was relaxed out. Now it's contracted, and from the relaxed state, it is now the contracted. You see these ventricles which contract. At rest, only about 40% of cross bridges are forming during systole. So this is like 40% of contractile myocyte. Why is this so? Why not 100%?
We should leave little bit space.
Hmm?
We should leave little space inside the heart because it will be.
Remember the innervation? What did I say? We don't need the innervation to make the heart to beat, but we need an innervation to regulate this.
So the bigger pace, the more myocytes will contract?
Yeah, but what about the contractile force?
We know that rule of Stan's.
Okay. Okay. So okay, it's let's say it's the same thing, but not. Okay. The contractile force. Why do we need only 40%? Because we have, as I said, this sympathetic and parasympathetic innervation. So if we want our heart at one time to start to beat more powerful, so it will increase to like 50% or 60% or 70%. So if we want to increase the stroke volume, this volume which was ejected after a systole, after this contraction, so we will increase it, and if we want to decrease it, we will decrease it. And the increase will make the sympathetic system and decrease the parasympathetic system. It's pretty clear, isn't it? Okay, so actually this whole thing, wait a second, this calcium will first bind the troponin C, after that it will relocate, the tropomyosin, it will be free, and it will make these cross bridges. This will happen till we have a lot of calcium inside of the cytoplasm. Does it make sense? We have a lot of calcium binds, and so on. But actually, what do we need? We need a relaxation. We need a relaxation of the heart. Because we first need a systole, after that a diastole. It's pretty simple. So how does it work? It works because this calcium goes, it just detaches from this troponin C. It just detaches from it. So it's not associated with troponin C, and so this is why troponin C and tropomyosin are now not relocated. So they go to their start position. So they cover these binding sites of actin. So if these binding sites are covered, you cannot make a contraction. Easy? Okay, so this calcium goes out, it just detaches. These things relocate back. So these things, troponin C and tropomyosin, start to cover, and this is why the myosin head understands. Okay, they are actually covered. I cannot really make this contact. I cannot really make this cross bridge. So this is how we cannot make this contraction. And from this contraction, it gets to the relaxation. It was like this, it was like this, and after that it starts to go back. Okay, how it works? Calcium detaches from the troponin C, yes? Yes. Calcium detaches from the troponin C. After that, 85%, as I said before, 85% came in because of the calcium-induced calcium release, and 15% came in directly. So here is the same thing. 85% of calcium, they all detach from troponin C. Calcium, 85% of calcium come back to the NSR. Why do we need this network and this network sarcoplasmic reticulum? Because only this network SR has this SERCA and PLN. What is SERCA? SERCA is pump. So this pump pumps this calcium into the MSR. Why do we need a pump? Why don't we have just a channel?
Because it's very hard, very big concentration in...
Yeah, it's very hard. It's pretty hard because we have a lot of calcium here, and we need to have a lot of calcium here, and a low concentration here. So if we will have the channel here, calcium will go out because calcium wants to equalize the concentrations of calcium inside of the cell and outside of the cell. It's pretty easy, yeah. You are right. So we need once more, we need energy. We need a pump to push this calcium against the concentrations gradient. So this pump is called SERCA. So this SERCA pumps the calcium back to the NSR. And from this NSR, calcium goes to the calsequestrin, which is located in junctional SR. So this is how this storage works. This calcium storage works. This PLN, this orange thing, this PLN is associated with SERCA and it inhibits the SERCA. So you will need it for the other lectures. SERCA is pump which pumps calcium inside. PLN is phospholamban. It is an inhibitor of SERCA. And 15% of calcium go out directly. Here 15% came in directly, here 15% go out directly. We have this NCX. NCX is sodium calcium exchanger. Sodium calcium exchanger. It's pretty simple. How does it work? 3 sodium come in, 1 calcium goes out. This is how one cycle works. 3 sodium come in, calcium goes out. So let's repeat the whole thing. Why do I explain this? It's pretty. Let's repeat it. But give me a small break. Pacemaker cells generate action potential, yes? Because of funny channels. They have a lot of funny channels, they activate, they have a de-polarization, repolarization, here are funny channels, de-polarization, repolarization, funny channels. This is like this only. This is always like this. So we have a lot of action potentials. And they will always happen without any rest. Because of the depolarized state in pacemaker cells, the cations come from the pacemaker cells to contractile myocyte. This is how this initiation works. We have this big thing. This is how this initiation, this part of depolarization works. Because of this inflow, because there's this flow of calcium inside of the cell. After that, we have this action potential of contractile myocyte. And what do we need there? We need an L-type calcium channel. Because calcium comes in. Yes? It's easy now? And this calcium comes in. We have this calcium-induced calcium release. Calcium binds to troponin C. It deviates this troponin, it relocates this troponin C in tropomyosin, so they cannot really cover these binding sites. After that, we have these cross bridges and so on. So we have this sliding into each other of actin and myosin. After that, calcium detaches from troponin C, and it comes in. It goes out from the. Okay, comes in and goes out. It comes into the NSR and goes out here. So this is how the cycle works. And after that, we have another action potential of pacemaker cells. It induces another action potential of contractile myocyte. These L-type calcium channels, calcium, we need the calcium for the contraction. This is how it works. Did you get it or not?
Yes.
This was actually the whole point of my presentation.
Yes.
If you didn't get it, it will hurt me actually. So it was enough, maybe. It was enough for you or not?